Living consciousness, opportunity in shifting perspective. Good morning and welcome to Living Consciousness. It's your opportunity in shifting perspective. And I have a few announcements before I welcome again my partner, Dr. Kurt Bickford. I want to let you all know that this is a half-hour program that is a warm-up to our one-day seminars that we do once a month at the Hilton in San Bernardino, and live stream, if you're not living locally, is available as well. And I will give you those sites to register or get more information at the end of our program today. I do want to make an announcement that we have a date change for our one-day seminar for next month, September. We were going to be meeting for our one-day seminar on September 28th. We are changing that date to September 14th, and our next radio show as a result of that will be September 7th. So our next Living Consciousness radio show, Shifting Perspective, will be September 7th. But we welcome to our show today. We're so excited to have you. And I want to welcome Dr. Kurt Bickford.
Good morning.
Who is going to be answering. I have a lot of questions for you today. I hope you're primed.
Can't wait.
So we welcome all of you, and we have such gratitude that all of you have joined with us today to maybe get a few tidbits. Our title today is More on the Path. More of everything on the path. And again, I will be giving you some websites at the end, but our main website is living-consciousness.com, and you can get a lot of great info, as well as our other primary website, BickfordCovington.com. I am Tracy Covington, a clinical psychologist, and I welcome you. And again, as I said, I'm with my partner, Dr. Kurt Bickford, who's also a clinical and a neuropsychologist and an expert in spirituality, consciousness, and the path of psychology through it all. So to start with today, I'd like to know, Dr. Bickford, what's the difference between a spiritual approach to life and a religious orientation to life?
Well, when we're participating in a religious path, we are aligning ourselves with a belief system that has been taught across time. And that belief system is primarily made up. It's made up by authority, church authorities. And in that, it has specific perspectives that don't always align with life and don't always align with what's best for humanity. And as a result, it creates a great deal of conflict. And if we think about all the great spiritual teachers across time, none of them set up the idea to deify them. None of them set up the idea to have a ritualized way of understanding their teachings. And so that's really man-made, and it's based in authority. And in that, then, there is no subjective experience. You follow rules, and you practice rites and rituals. On a spiritual path, we see that spiritual development isn't an accomplishment. It's not something that you attend once a week or twice a week or go to Mass daily or anything like that, but rather it's a way of life. It's how one orientates themselves to life, and by what beliefs or understandings, subjective understandings, does one have in aligning that life with life itself. And so in that, there's a huge difference. The subjective experience of the spiritual walk versus the shared experience of the religious walk. So they're far different. They're different motives. So the only important thing is what is the direction of your motives.
Okay, so how does one spiritualize their life?
Well, in spiritualizing your life, the only thing that's necessary is to shift your motive. To constantly be aware of what your actual motive is. And what we tend to find is that if we go on human motives, we tend to take up positions. We operate from positionalities of what's right and what's wrong, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And all of this really ultimately comes down to the issue of personal gain and aggrandizing the self. Versus from a spiritual walk, it's about service or love and serving the greater good versus the greed and acquisition for the self. And so we see then that spiritual work really requires consciousness and awareness and orientation and intention that we live our life by.
Okay, well, there certainly is a lot of aggrandizement of self going around. So it's, I think, that's just a very critical point.
Well, and we also see that many people use that in their religious practice.
Oh, yes.
That every religion comes from the point of view that they are the sole holder of truth. Specialness. And when we talk about specialness, now we're talking about the ego.
Wow.
And so if we're talking about the ego, how does the ego then play into divinity? And as we can see, they're opposites.
So there is no corner of the world or aspect to how life unfolds on television, in our churches, in our organizations, in our social networks, in our businesses where aggrandizement really isn't kind of proposed as the way to be.
Yeah, we're all enticed to, quote, be more, and to be more is always defined as getting more. It's acquiring more, whether it's the acquisition of material goods or if it's the acquisition of entitlements, aggrandizements, celebrity, glamour.
Which we just so worship in this country.
Oh, so much so. And now we call common everyday vocations, those people are heroes.
Yes.
Well, they're not heroes, they're people doing a job. And when we start blowing things out of proportion, then it distorts reality.
It really is key. And that brings me to a context-content kind of question for you as far as blowing things. So many of us have heard you distinguish actually quite often between content and context. I was wondering if you could maybe share even a little bit more today again on that, because it's always so relevant, and here it is again, so pertinent.
We have to think of consciousness as developmental, and in any process being developmental, the further we are on that developmental path, the more aligned or attuned or better at it we are. And one of the things we see in the human condition is that the lower one's level of consciousness, the more oriented they are to content. That is, the things that are going on within a moment in time. So acquisition, materialism becomes very, very important. How I'm treated becomes very, very important. And there's a very narcissistic orientation to life in the lower realms of consciousness.
Can you quickly define narcissistic? Because I know many of us are aware of the word, but it's so critical, I think, in this point you're making.
Well, there's a psychological emptiness that exists within that individual, and as such, in trying to fulfill, have some sense of completeness, everything they think, everything they feel, and everything they do is about their self, about their own benefit. And in that, we start to see that everything is about their own self-absorption. And they see the world in a very much cause and effect point of view. But as we move up in consciousness and as we move into the mid-ranges, we kind of move from a materialistic orientation to more of a moral orientation. What serves society? And so we see that the institutions of society are all designed to serve the greater good. And now we move from a self-absorbed orientation more to a community orientation. Beautiful. But if we move up even further in consciousness, into the realms of love, then we see that the moralizing, that is, telling people by authority what is right and wrong and how you're supposed to behave, moves to a loving orientation. And within that now, context becomes important. How we view what people do becomes important. And so we're less likely to condemn people, judge people, criticize people, and merely see that any errors that are being made are really just errors of ignorance and lack of development. So there's no need to condemn and judge. And then, of course, if we move up even further into the beginning states of enlightenment, then our orientation switches yet again, moves to compassion. And the idea of the reduction of suffering for all sentient beings. And so as we move up in consciousness, things change. And what changes primarily is we move from the stuff of life to the context of life. And when we move to context, it brings meaning to life. When we stay in the realm of stuff, then what happens is the law of impermanence kicks in. Nothing that you gain in the realm of stuff is going to stay with you. It all disappears eventually. It wears out, or you lose your interest in it, thereby needing more stuff. So that's kind of what we mean.
Okay, so how do we get going here? How do we get our spirituality going? How do we roll?
Well, the whole idea is that once in movement, life becomes easier. It's easier to shift and change. If we're stuck, if we stay adhered to rigid thinking about life and our role in life and others' role in life, we don't move very fast. But if one is desirous of moving, then it all starts by telling the truth. It's that inner honesty that we tell to ourselves about ourselves. Not that distorted view, not that aggrandized view, not that egoic view, but the truth about why we do what we do. For example, if we are engaged in behaviors that are deleterious, unhealthy for our body, then the inner truth is to really look at what it is we are doing that is harming our health. That's what we're talking about in terms of inner honesty. And that's at all levels, body, mind, and spirit, because we can affect ourselves negatively by what we think, and we can affect ourselves negatively by what we orient ourselves to. And if we orient ourselves to authority, we're always going to be off. So the higher we grow in consciousness, the freer the experience becomes. And so what the world may call spiritual awareness or intuition or growth of the consciousness start occurring. And so as we grow in consciousness, what tends to happen then is we start to surrender the negative feelings and all the attachments we've had that were meant to fill us up, because they become less and less rewarding, less and less fulfilling. And as that happens, we become increasingly conscious. So from that point of view then, that which was impossible to see or experience at lower levels of consciousness then becomes increasingly self-evident and ultimately stunningly obvious at higher levels of consciousness. So again, it all starts by creating movement, and we create movement by telling the honest, radical, subjective truth of why we do what we do, why we think what we think, and why we feel what we feel.
So you're referring to, and I just want to, for those that are new to us, I want to make you all aware that we are referring to levels of consciousness. And there's actually a map to levels of consciousness.
Correct.
That we have spoken to on many of our radio shows.
Right.
Would you like to give a quick reference?
Well, ultimately, the map of consciousness has been refined, expanded, and clearly explained for us by Dr. David Hawkins, who is rather famous for having developed the map of consciousness. But its original development was back early 1900s, about 1910, 20, at Columbia University, where psychology and psychiatry developed a hierarchy of human behavior. And Dr. Hawkins' genius was that he expanded out that knowingness to cognitive processes, emotional processes, life view, and God view. So it's a rather profound document.
So I'm going to switch gears as far as levels of consciousness, and yet the levels of consciousness apply to everything that you're going to be. I know as far as every question I ask you, it's always going to come through. So
everything.
So what is it about pain and suffering in this life? So many seem to be living lives of great suffering and many even quiet desperation.
Yes. And that too is an expression of consciousness. If we think this all the way through, all pain and suffering that you experience arise solely from your ego. And it's not from God. It's not like there's a vengeful God out there who says, oh, well, you upset me, so now you've got to pay. No.
Although many do believe that.
Many do believe that. And
it's
that's the problem. That's the problem with following authority. Authority will tell you that what's happening to you now is because you deserve this. And we've heard this recently here in our country, where rather heinous things have occurred, and some religious crackpot out there makes a statement that this is what that community deserved because they believe something against God. And that, of course, is patently false. And that's how authority can distort things. So all suffering arises from the ego. And you all have had the experience that when time, in essence, stops. Now, we can have a whole discussion about time, but when I say time stops, I'm really talking about living in the moment. When you live in the moment, time basically stops. And when time stops, all problems disappear, because they're all just artifacts of a point of perception. And that point of perception is that your belief system is run through the filter, or the prism, of your level of consciousness. So the higher one's level of consciousness, the more free one is from arbitrary authority. The lower one's level of consciousness, the more entrenched one is in authority and belief systems. And so it's what the mind holds that determines one's level of pain and suffering. If we pull back far enough, we can see that we're not at the mercy of the world. Rather, we're only affected by what the mind believes. And I hope you can hear that.
Yeah, say that again.
We're not at the mercy of the world. It is not the world that is creating suffering and pain. Rather, it's what we hold in mind that creates the suffering and pain. The Buddha was very clear about this. And so we change the entire world by how it is envisioned. And in that we see that love changes the world each time it replaces lack of love. And in that we can clearly see then the orientation of the universe, which is towards love.
So suffering is common in this then existence?
Suffering is part of the human experience. And part of that is because psychologically we're not motivated to grow and change in most cases until we have higher states of consciousness, except for when we're in pain or we're suffering in some way. So if you think about the average person, the common person, that person's psyche is overwhelmed by layers of programmed belief systems, of which basically they're unaware. They believe that this is the way it is, and that's because they grew up with it, because they're not really utilizing those good brains of theirs in order to pull back far enough to see that it's merely indoctrination, it's merely programming. It's not truth, and it's done through the memes of society. And so we have to be very clear about this. And it's out of that naivete and the belief in the principles of causality that supposed causes and their solutions are sought out there, outside of ourselves. And again, there will never be any satisfaction. There will never, ever be any sense of fulfillment by attaching to things outside of the self. Whether it's material things, people, principles, processes, rites and rituals, religious beliefs, none of those will be fulfilling.
So you're bringing us back around to the realization we are complete and whole within the self.
Absolutely. All things you need to grow on the path of enlightenment already exist within you. And it's only through maturity and the wisdom of spirituality that we start to take that search for fulfillment and start applying it directly inwardly. And it's when we turn inward that growth can actually start taking place. As long as we keep evaluating ourselves based on anything outside of ourselves, we will always fall short and we will always feel less than. And even in those brief moments where you've aggrandized yourself because you've acquired that super duper car, or you've moved to that great neighborhood, or you've acquired a raise or an increase in title or some moment of fame, all of those are fleeting. None of those will stay with you.
So we're always hungry.
Always hungry. And we always find something then to help quell that hunger, and usually that thing is unhealthy. And so whether we're talking about how we consume food, how we consume substances like alcohol or drugs or medications, or how we distract ourselves with music and TV and movies, or whatever it is we use to avoid living life.
Now, this takes some practice to really get truthful with ourselves, and I guess I want to encourage those tuning in that this takes some practice, and that if it doesn't come easily or you feel as though you are being truthful, let us be clear that you're not. And that the more you pause to really do the inner seeking of your truth, the more and more will come to your realization. But
Right.
It's the practice of it.
And this is why we often need to have a coach, a guide, somebody who is spiritually oriented and further on the developmental path, because it's confusing. It's exceptionally confusing, and yet the all necessary tools to grow in this path already exist within. You just need somebody to help point out what's debris and what's truth, and they sometimes are obscured.
So just real quickly on that, to find a coach or a guide, this might be somebody who maybe is a clinical psychologist, a PhD in psychology, who specializes in consciousness, who's maybe a spiritually conscious psychologist, somebody who's done coaching in that kind of field, is taught in that field, maybe has even done research in that field. These are a little more unique individuals than what you're just going to find on your insurance panel typically, although they do exist.
They do exist, and again, it's only an issue of development. And in psychology, as in all fields, some are masters in their field, some are novices, some have belief systems that distort reality. So one has to be very careful who they align with. And in that way, you have to be very attuned to where you're headed and what your goals and orientation and motivations are. There's a lot of deception going on out there.
So we're located in Redlands and Upper Desert Apple Valley area, but we're available live stream, Skype. We're available to people individually in the local areas. But if you're seeking outside, you just kind of might want to keep in mind somebody who's worked in consciousness or has done a lot of study in the field of consciousness, as well as has a very good, solid education behind them. It does make a difference. And I just want to bring a question that's come through our text here. We thank you, Miriam, for joining us. And she's back to those things that align with health. She's asking about, so for example, we should act like we are happy to be really happy. I think it's a great question, and often it's something that's kind of taught out there, and that's not quite what we're saying. But I was hoping you could maybe address it. She's really trying to understand a lot of what we're teaching here today.
Well, Marian, it's a great question, because a lot of people are being taught that happiness is something that you can acquire through an acquisition of some sort. And that's not true. Happiness is really a state of being. And as a state of being, it's a state of consciousness. And so once we move out of dualistic thinking, that is that right or wrong thinking, then happiness often becomes that state of being, and it's found in the realms of love. And in the realms of love, there is no room for dualistic thinking. There is no room for right or wrong. There's the understanding that all people do the best all the time, And any errors that are made, they're really just made out of ignorance. So if we knew better, we would do better. So when we're seeking a spiritual walk, we're looking at aspects of self, body, mind, and spirit. And so everything we do, everything we orient ourselves towards is towards health. And in orienting towards health, that means we're orienting towards life, which was the first great gift each of us was given. The second great gift, of course, was the awareness that you're alive. So if we're going to have gratitude for the life given, then we start with body, not in a fanatical way, because the time of your death is already established through karmic propensities. But then we're talking about the quality of that life until that death. So you can trash your body, and we can guarantee that the last few phases of life will be miserable. Or you can take care of your body, and that means give it proper nutrition, proper exercise, and proper rest, and engage in all other behaviors in moderation. And that includes your orientation to health. This isn't about being radical. It's about just being healthy, if that helps.
So I think she's getting to the idea again of that, what we think is a guidance to what we are feeling and being as well. And that is, it's really moving into acceptance of everything is what it needs to be for us in this moment.
Absolutely.
Versus that hunger, which says, I need something outside of myself. And so it's a shifting. The happiness is just evolves as a result of our full acceptance, our radical acceptance of that which is.
Correct.
So it's the process of letting go of the hunger states, the belief systems, the thing that says, get this job or drive this car and now you will have it, you will feel so great. But
eat this gallon of ice cream, yeah.
Or be on this special diet for that.
Right.
I mean, it goes in all directions.
Anything that has to do with specialness is out of bounds.
So that brings us kind of to our last question, and that is about, it seems is that when we think of enlightenment, we think of being great, of standing out from the crowd. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Buddha, Jesus. Is it necessary to be that special, that standing out person?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Do people who are enlightened often garner attention? Yes, they garner attention because they stand out in how they orient their life. But there are many people who are enlightened who we've never heard of, people who have lived quiet lives, just being ordinary. And if we think about the experience of being ordinary in and of itself, that is an expression of divinity. It's not about being glamorized. It's not about getting big recognition. If we look at the truth of one's real self, we can discover that through the pathway of everyday life. It's how you orient yourself to the commonplace, how you orient yourself to the things you do in just living. For example, many of us aren't really fond of cleaning our house, and often we hire people to do that. But if we think this all the way through, cleaning the house can be a tremendous joy and an act of gratitude. For what? For having a house. And if we have gratitude for the things we've been given, then that creates freedom within us then to be that common person. If we don't have that gratitude, then we're longing for something else. So whatever we have, we think, oh, it should be better. And therefore, if it should be better, then I don't even enjoy what it is that I have. And if I don't enjoy it, I likely don't take care of it. That includes our body, that includes our mind, that includes our spirit, and that includes the things in our life that we've been given. So it's really about living your life with care and kindness. It's the only thing that's necessary. And what happens is in every single task, in every single moment, in everything we think and feel, it really reveals the true self. And that's how you know where you are on the path. If your thoughts are still negative, if your thoughts are still condemning, if your thoughts are still judgmental and criticizing, or you have a tendency to prejudge, then it tells you that your ego's running the show. If your heart is open, if you're welcoming, if you're kind, if you're gentle, if you're compassionate, and that includes compassionate to yourself, then you're more aligned with the divine, with divinity, with life. Life and divinity are one and the same. And we have to be very clear about that. And we have to be clear that we are on a developmental process. That's all this is. And that includes the entire universe. The universe is still in a developmental process. And creation and creator are one and the same. And evolution is the process of creation unfolding before us,
Beautiful.
Of which we are all part of.
Beautiful. Well, Dr. Bickford, thank you. It's awesome again to sit with you as we do once a month and be able to process these kinds of sometimes very complex concepts, but really meant for our everyday, every moment walk.
Absolutely.
Great gratitude. Thank you.
Hope this is helpful. Namaste.
Namaste. And as far as further information regarding living-consciousness, we do have 2 websites you can check out. living-consciousness.com, which is just specific to our schedule of radio shows and once a month seminars, as well as Bickford, B as in boy, ICKFORD, Covington, COV, V as in velvet, INGTON.com is our main website, which has an interactive calendar on it. And you can see that we run meditation classes and ongoing seminars, as well as other offerings through our corporate Redlands office. But you can find all that information out through the interactive calendar, as well as registration links, which will be up later this afternoon regarding all the things going on. So we have such deep gratitude that you join us for the seminar. Miriam, I want to thank you specifically for having courage to text us questions, and we invite others to do the same in our upcoming our radio shows once a month. Again, we will be back on the air September 7th. We hope you get to join us then. We have deep gratitude for all of your interest. It is that we are seeking a greater level of consciousness that raises the level of quality for the world. Namaste.